Hello, Rob, the editor of the Biomedical Scientist magazine here. Welcome to the latest instalment of the IBMS Chat podcast. Each episode is based on the Twitter Spaces chats that take place on the first Wednesday of every month. IBMS Chief Executive David Wells was on hosting duties for this instalment, and he was joined by Michelle Payne, Mehwish, Khalid, and Rachel Cleaton to discuss the role of Pathology Practice Educators in healthcare science. I hope you enjoy the episode, and remember that this can be used for your CPD.
Hi everyone, welcome to our space this month. Tonight we're going to be talking about pathology practice educators and their role in healthcare science. We're fortunate enough to have David Wells, Mehwish, Khalid, and Rachel Cleaton with us, as well as Michelle Payne. We're going to be talking about pathology practice educators, what they do, and their work. Before we get started, we have a few simple housekeeping points. Please firstly remember that this space is public, meaning that anyone can listen, and the space will be recorded so those who can't attend can catch up later. If you want to speak, you can request to join the group of speakers by pressing the request button at the bottom corner of your screen. 10 people can be in the speaker group at one time, so we'll do our best to hear from as many of you as possible. You can also take part by tweeting us a reply and by pressing the purple speech button that should be in the bottom right of your screen. Finally, our regular IBMS chat thread is live, so you can also chat over there if you want. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to David now.
Thank you very much, and welcome to today's session. I think we're just waiting for one of our speakers to join. I think we've got with me two of the practice educators. I'm just hoping, there's Rachel now, so we've got everyone on the call. So first of all, welcome to this month's IBMS Chats. It's really great to be with you this month and talking to you about something which is an area that's really very, very close to my heart, and that's the practice educators. A bit of instructions for practice educators. They were brought into within NHS England during the COVID pandemic, really supporting us as a community in ramping up our workforce capability as we needed more and more people to have the capability to undertake testing and undertake testing safely. That's the most important part. So the practice educators showed their worth in my personal, also the view of other people, and actually those roles have continued working within NHS England, and now we've got at least 21 practice educators working across the 29 networks in England. Many started at different times, and some of you all know who your practice educator is if you work in England. Some of you may not do, but let me tell you now, they are a force for good in terms of supporting the profession as we move forward post-pandemic in a way that's actually very exciting. So if I can, I shall invite each of the practice educators who we've got with us today to introduce themselves and perhaps give them a bit of a very short introduction about what they're doing. So if I could start, please, with Michelle.
Hi, Dave, very much. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. It's the first time on something like this.
We can hear you, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me today and to join you. So I'm the practice educator working in the northeast and North Cumbria of England, and I've been in this now part-time for 1 year and full-time additionally for 6 months, so a year and a half altogether. I am an HCPC registered biomedical scientist, and I started my career in an NHS lab. I'm a microbiologist by background, and then following on from that, I've worked in academia, and I've worked for about 7 years in a higher education institution. And I worked on biomedical science programs and the healthcare science program, so the PTP program, as some of you might know of it, supported apprenticeships, and we focused on placements as well. So in terms of my role, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but we all sit in our roles in slightly different ways within our networks. All of our networks took up the roles slightly differently, and I sit within our integrated care system and our diagnostics team, and I've been spending quite a lot of work looking at developing a workforce strategy for our pathology workforce across the northeast and North Cumbria. So that's kind of where I spend quite a lot of my time at the moment.
Thank you, Michelle. Can I invite Mehwish next?
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here to speak to you all about our roles. So I'm Mehwish. I am the Pathology Practice Educator in London. This is my second year in the role, and while the first year was just looking after Network 3, which is BOTSLT and BHRUT, this year I'm doing this role full-time, and part of my role is to work on the regional projects and support the other networks within London as well. And by background, I am a biochemistry lab manager and have always had a strong interest in supporting our workforce in development and training. And this role has been the perfect opportunity to, have a wider scope and work with other practice educators and really have our voices heard at a regional and national level.
Excellent, thank you, Ash. And then last but no means least, Rachel.
My patch covers six hospital sites. So I've been in post since around August 2020, and my remit is around covering apprenticeships, looking at novel apprenticeship routes, as well as supporting departments with expanding training places for STP and HSST programs. My background is microbiology, so I was a specialist biomedical scientist in microbiology for nearly 19 years, and then I migrated into a pathology training lead post. And yeah, like Michelle, I've also sit on the Herefordshire and Worcestershire ICS, and I was part of also, for some of you who may remember, I was part of the Modernising Scientific Careers project as well, and did work for a short time at the National School of Healthcare Science when the programmes first started. So I spend a lot of my time sort of supporting departments with apprenticeships, with funding routes and workplace accreditation, and offering advice around those areas, because these days it's very, very complex, and so I find that departments need support around this and need information around options on funding and things like that.
Excellent, thank you, Rachel. And we the very first part of what you were saying, but I think that was just your saying who you were. So otherwise you can hear you perfectly. So like I said, the practice educators really added value during the pandemic. I wonder if it's worth, and perhaps I'll turn to you, Michelle, because I think you were one of the early practice educators involved in some of that initial work. How do you think your role has evolved over the last, since you and a bit, I suppose, isn't it? But a bit more than that, since the pandemic.
So we were originally, the original aim of the practice educators, one of the original aims was to look at being able to rapidly upskill the workforce, increase our workforce in terms of the band 2 to the band 5 roles, and to promote apprenticeships as well. The job descriptions for our roles would, like I say, they were taken up quite differently depending on where you were in England. But there's a lot of overlap. But in terms of my job description, I remember going to interview and kind of saying, there's a lot of different things on here. What are we going to be looking at first? And it was, I suppose, looking at, the answer was, well, we'll work out what needs looking at by your research and working at and speaking and getting the data and so on, and find out what's needed. And it started as getting a little baseline as to where my network in the North East and North Cumbria. So I have 7 trusts in my network, 7 pathology departments within my network across the trusts. It started off being, get a bit of a baseline of where we are with the workforce, what's needed, trying to find out what people think the problems are. And then it's evolved into developing a workforce strategy for my network, aligned with the NHS England's maturity matrix. That's the recommendations for us to develop ourselves as networks. And since then, that's predominantly where I'm working. So looking at how we can implement the workforce strategy, aligning it with other diagnostic modalities. So working alongside things like imaging and work. So I work in a team with people like that, so we can learn from each other and kind of look at diagnostics as a whole as well, rather than quite an isolated area. So there's been a lot of development in that area, and it just keeps growing and growing.
Excellent, Michelle. Thank you for that. And I think your comments around being involved in workforce strategy are really very important, aren't they? Because this is probably one of the first times that actually we've got biomedical scientists working within pathology, really pushing a workforce strategy. We've not really had one before, have we? Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I think it is a fair comment. I think certainly in my network, and I think the others will echo this, we've worked quite, probably haven't even really had workforce strategies within trusts, within departments. And I think this was about bringing everybody together to look at what we wanted across the network, what we needed across the network, and how we could support each other. And there wasn't really a strategy in place. It was, as it still is often, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate, a lot of firefighting and a lot of just getting our heads down and getting on with it. And I think part of the benefit of these roles is we have the luxury to have a little bit of that headspace and support people with thinking strategically, which is something that some of the people working in the lab, managers and training leads, don't really get that time to do that. So we're able to offer that support and think about things more strategically. And I think that's been a huge benefit to the role.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to segue very neatly because I do know the answer to this question, but I really want to hear the work that Mehwish has done. When you start talking about having some headspace to do things differently, Mehwish, it'd be really interesting to hear about the work you've been doing with colleagues across London and with institute colleagues around the specialist portfolio. Could you run through what's been going on there? Because I think it's been a really exciting space there.
That's correct, David. It is something that's been found to be really useful, especially so it's something that we started piloting in London, and it came about as a result of the skills gap analysis that we were undertaking and the discussions we were having within our networks. And one of the areas that we identified where the labs were really struggling to support training was at the specialist level due to the lack of protected time for trainers and trainees. And that's where we thought the practice educators could come in and the labs deliver some of the theoretical aspects of the portfolio via online webinars. And so we started piloting this in London. We've had a lot of support from the IBMS specialist advisory panelists who have actually been very helpful and in reviewing the presentation slides and feeding us back to make sure that the content we're delivering actually meets the learning outcome. And we've had so much support from the subject matter experts working within the labs, whether they're the clinical staff or the biomedical scientist staff, volunteering to give up their time and deliver these webinars. And the one we piloted was in clinical biochemistry, and we soon realized this is something that could be rolled out to other regions in the country and also cover various disciplines for specialist portfolio. And yes, I think it's been about 6 months now that we've now actually made a start with all the major disciplines for specialist portfolio, and our webinar programs are running. And what we're finding is there's so we've been monitoring the attendance for the live webinars as well as the recordings that we're putting onto our Future NHS platform, and our number of members for the Future NHS platform is growing day by day. We now have well over 1,000 members registered on our workspace who are accessing these recordings. And yes, it just shows the power of collaboration, and not just within the networks, but also with other institutes like the IBMS.
Thank you, Rachel. And that's a nice, neat segue. I think someone will be putting a link into the IBS chat around how people can be more aware of what's going on. And I think that's a future site, Rachel. Can you tell us a bit more what people can find on that site and how they can get a bit more involved in some of the work?
Thank you, David. I do apologise for my technical issues this evening. I do hope you can all hear me, and apologies, I couldn't hear when Michelle was speaking, so if there was a bit of repetition, I do apologise for that. Yeah, so the work, the site is on the NHS Futures platform, where the link has been shared. It's a site that the Practice Educator Network is compiling all our information for sharing, so including the specialist portfolio project. We're sharing job descriptions on there and career maps and all of the apprenticeship information. We're trying to compile it all in one place. It is in development still. So do bear with us, but I do think it's worthwhile members accessing the information on that site. There are webinars on there for CPD, and so if members follow the link, then they can be granted access to register with the Futures NHS Futures platform, and then they can join our workspace. And also, once you're on the platform, there are other workspaces as well that would be of interest to you. So it's almost like a treasure trove of information and resources.
Thank you, Rachel. And also, before I come away from you, Rachel, Mehwish mentioned that obviously colleagues have been working closely with the IBMS, but actually it's not just the IBMS that Practice is working with. It'd be really good to hear the range of organisations that you're working with. Could you sort of run over some of the people who you've been working with, and perhaps also, Michelle, if there's any that's been missed off by Rachel, you could include them.
Thank you, David. So, so I'm very well linked with obviously the laboratories and the training officers that we have within our local laboratories and our service managers, but also have links with NHS England and Health Education England, and links with the National School. And since being in this role, I'm finding that the Practice Educator title is widely recognised within the Trust. And so I now have a seat at the Host Trust Strategic Education Group, which enables me to meet with my nursing colleagues and AHP leads, pharmacy, medical education leads as well. So that's great to be able to link with those, and because there's a lot of training and education resource that we can share, particularly around workplace accreditation, which, as you know, is a huge task to navigate. I also am a member of the Herefordshire and Worcestershire ICS healthcare science faculty group. So we meet as a wider healthcare science group with those scientists in the medical physics and physiological sciences and bioinformatics specialities as well. So I and at our host trust, we've formed a healthcare science board where we meet with our colleagues that are working outside of pathology, and we collaborate to have a wider voice to raise awareness of scientists within the trusts.
Excellent. So it certainly sounds like you're well embedded into all of the systems that perhaps in the past we've struggled to be embedded with, isn't it? It really is a very positive position for us to be in. In terms of Mehwish and Michelle, is there anything different from your roles? Because everyone's role is slightly different, isn't it? Are there people who you're working with in different ways, or people that you're getting to interact with and influence?
There's lots of similarities in terms of some of the content that Rachel's spoken about in the groups that she sits on. And it's probably just worth saying at this point that part of the benefit of being part of a network of practice educators across England is that if one of us is well embedded within groups like NHSE England group that's been really useful, we share that with the network, and inevitably one of us will say, oh, actually I could probably do with finding out more about how our area works, and we can link up like that. So that's been a real benefit of kind of working as a network, sort of seeing where the gaps are and where we can help each other with that. In terms of anything additional, she might have said it, and sorry if you'd mentioned this, Rachel, but there's we have, I think all of us, and I do certainly have quite strong links with our higher education institutions, so in universities, and we're also developing our links with our colleges as well, and that's both locally and nationally, because part of our role, well, my title has kind of workforce and education lead within it, so we strongly work with those education providers to help with the pipeline, basically, for us, how to feed into these groups, these institutions, to say, what do we need, what are we lacking, working on them with if we need apprenticeships. So we work quite strongly with those people. The other thing to say, probably, because we have a workforce strategy in the North East and North Cumbria, and I know lots of areas do as well, we've had to set up governance structures around that, and we have clear structures and clear groups, and that's been a real benefit of my role in particular. So we've had lots of working groups for a long time in terms of lead groups and manager groups, but I think the practice educator role has really strengthened that. Our scientific training and education group has really strengthened in its function. I think that's been a real benefit of part of the role, is having that time to help develop that working group, and that feeds into relevant managers groups, and that feeds into pathology boards. So we have a voice and a seat at the table, whether directly or indirectly, in lots of different areas now. So and similarly to Rachel, I think I mentioned earlier, I do sit in on wider diagnostics groups have really good working relationships with our local NHS and Health Education England, who have been really supportive, and we work really closely now. Not to mention actually that obviously we're doing this IBMS chat now, but we have monthly meetings with yourself, David, and your colleagues within IBMS. That has been really, really useful for us in terms of having that direct link with IBMS and being able to indirectly link out all of our pathology workforce with yourselves as well. So that's been really useful.
Well, and I'll say it's very useful for us as well, Michelle. So I'm going to turn to some of the comments and questions we've been getting in as we've been going on, and there's a couple of things. So Sherry Beckett, who's obviously a friend of IBMS Chat, is a big shout out to the London team on the work you've done around the specialty portfolio, which I wholeheartedly agree. Michelle, you've got a mention from Deborah saying you undersell yourself hugely in terms of the impact you've had. And I think that's true of a lot of practice educators. Actually, I think I don't think you realise the impact that you're having. And then we come a bit more into actually, well, we talk about the practice educators being really the role itself is becoming quite a vital role within the UK healthcare. But I said at the beginning, we've only got about 22 out of the 29 networks in England covered. And we don't currently have any in the devolved nations. I don't know who wants to pick up this question because it's quite a difficult one. So perhaps Rachel, you might be able to answer this question. How do people get involved, or what are we doing to close the gap in England? And what are your thoughts about the sharing this information and the resources with the devolved nations?
Thank you, David. Unfortunately, I can't hear Michelle, so I do apologise if there's repetition in what we're saying. But I do feel that the awareness around the role in healthcare science is growing. So we're seeing, these roles appearing in the physiological sciences, for instance. And I think the more we demonstrate the value of the roles, then I think the other nations will pick up on that. So I think it's about developing our network and sharing the work that we do, and also raising awareness about the work that we're doing, and just hope that others will come on board, because I think that we're just seeing such a benefit in collaborating, whereas often in pathology we work within our own disciplines within a service, and so we're just for the first time sort of stepping out and collaborating together. So I think it would be great for other nations to become a part of that.
Excellent, I agree. And Mehwish, one for you. This is a bit of a sell, I suppose. If there are people from the devolved nations, so Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, what would you say has been probably the biggest benefit you've felt in having the roles and having the network of practice educators?
That's a tough question, David. There's loads of benefits, but if I was to name, let's say the top 3 benefits, one, our practice educator network. I think I cannot even mention the amount of times we get in touch with each other. There's so many different ways we can help each other out when we get stuck, whether it's sharing ideas, finding solutions together, regular meetings. We have a WhatsApp group. We share a lot of resources on our Future NHS platform. So sharing learning, sharing good practice. A lot of the practice educators in the past 2 years or so have worked on a lot of innovative projects, and we're also publishing case studies as we go along. So again, sharing those with our colleagues. So any good practice can also be replicated elsewhere in other regions. So that's certainly one. The other one, I think, where the practice educators have been instrumental is in securing funding by making successful bids to support staff working within pathology services to undertake further training and development. And there was a significant investment in upskilling through degree top-ups, and the practice educator played quite a big role in ensuring that the networks were aware of this funding and that these were being distributed to right people at the right time. So that's another one. And the third one is really that the kind of links we have developed in the last couple of years. I think Michelle and Rachel listed quite a lot of them. So Higher Education Institutes, Health Education England, NHS England, IBMS, Academy of Healthcare Science, National School. There's just so many different links that have developed over the past few months, which wouldn't have been otherwise possible for us to achieve.
Excellent. And I'll probably come on to trying to list all your achievements shortly, but there's a couple more questions come in, and still on the same topic of how do we get these roles out further in across the UK. The IBMS, as you can tell, is a huge supporter of the practice educator model of working, and I can assure all of our members that whenever we meet the healthcare science leaders of those devolved nations, that we do raise the profile of the practice educators, when we really want to see Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland adopt these roles like England has, because we really think the value is there, and we really do think that that joint working and that networking collaboration, as you've all said, is really shifting the burden of training and facilitating training and supporting about what training is required in a way that we've never done before. And I think we're also building a better picture of what the workforce for the future is. The quid pro quo for the Institute, of course, is that it helps us understand. And again, perhaps this is perhaps a question to myself, is what has been the advantage for the practice educators for the IBMS? As everyone has said so far, we are able to talk directly to people who are far closer to the bench in a way that we perhaps haven't done for a long time. And we're able to have conversations, understand where the challenges are, understand where the complex parts of our processes cause frustration, and where we can do better in general. And I hope that colleagues, practice educated colleagues, will agree that we really have charged through a whole load of areas where we've had challenges and problems, and really made them as far as possible, as simple as possible, and fix them as problems. So from the IBMS's point of view, that really has been a game changer, and I think we're starting to see the effect of that. And I invite the my respected speakers on the call to disagree wholeheartedly if they don't agree with me, but I generally think that we're seeing a real benefit there. I'll pause there and hope that they might say yes or no.
Yeah.
Absolutely, David, I agree. And could I just add in as well, we've mentioned the stakeholders that we engage with, but I think as another, and this is Rachel, sorry, it's helpful as well to have a dedicated role to raise the profile of healthcare science and biomedical science, so that we can, support careers events and raise the profile about science careers, because I think the NHS as a whole, if you explain that you work in the NHS, people might assume you're a nurse, a doctor, or a midwife, and to actually be able to share that there are really exciting science careers available in the NHS. I think I do foresee the practice educator role as a very kind of outward facing role, linking with local schools and looking at how we recruit in a different way and how we reach those local people.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, and I think and that is the point, isn't it? How do we make sure we're securing the workforce of the future? Is really, I say the name of the game, but it really is the lifeblood of what we all do, isn't it? So my next question is perhaps a bit more introspection into you guys as individuals. You clearly didn't wake up one morning and become a practice educator. What sort of development, if someone's looking at these roles and thinking, oh, that's a role that I could be interested in, what development have you had, and what sort of skill sets have you needed to develop to take on these roles? Because if I just cover slightly, Michelle, your role, you're now working very strategically, aren't you? And Rachel, I know you've had previous experience working very strategically in the centre of the way healthcare science work, but what skill sets do you think people ought to be aiming for if they wish to emulate you and move into these sort of roles? And I'm going to start perhaps with Mehwish, and then we'll move across to Michelle, then Rachel.
Thank you, David. Yes, that's right. When we did start in the roles, we felt like we needed a program that would help us develop some of these skills where, we're in this environment where we're trying to make changes, not just at the local level, but also trying to be heard and have an influence at the regional and national level. And we were so fortunate that there were 3 different cohorts to align with the different start dates of the practice educators. So there was a program developed by the Academy of Healthcare Science just for the practice educators. It's called the Pathology Practice Educator program, and a really, really beneficial, the kind of skills they equipped us with. they were completely targeted towards, the kind of job we would be doing in these roles, and really empowering us to go out there and make these changes and have an influence and really make the changes that we need to in order to tackle some of the challenges that our pathology workforce is facing. And now we're very happy to announce that the practice educators are developing a cohort 4 PEP-like program, which would be open to the senior biomedical scientists or managers who have been newly appointed into the roles, and the program will be aiming to help them develop as future pathology leaders. So again, this is in collaboration with the Academy of Healthcare Science, and we're hoping this PEP4 will be as useful as it was to the practice educators.
Thank you, Mesh. Can I pass on that on to Michelle? Same question.
Yes, thank you. When you asked this question, I thought, oh dear, this is starting to sound like an interview. Like, what skills and strengths do you have and need? But I think just running on from what Mehwish has said, and it's maybe not quite answering your question, David, but it's worth a mention, is that we still feel as practice educators that we have things we want to develop, that we maybe, the skills that we would maybe like to improve on. There's maybe some gaps in our knowledge that would be really in our role, and we're fortunate enough in this role that we do get a lot of support from IBMS, from NHS England, from the Academy, and for example, we're having some training in next week all together on workforce planning and looking at how we can kind of get involved with that more and be more strategic in how we're doing workforce planning. So I suppose I just thought it was worth a mention that there are times we feel a little bit out of our depth with certain things, but the network that we have, again, coming back to it, and we'll probably say it over and over again, because I think we can't emphasize enough how fortunate we feel to have a network across England with that we can reach out to and say, I don't really know how to do this. Does anybody know what to do for this? And people will recommend somebody to speak to, or a course to do, or they'll put us in contact with somebody who runs something. So that's been really, really important. So, we don't know everything, but we're well supported to develop as well. So that, I think that's something that really appeals to me in this, and it did appeal to me in this role. I could see when coming into the role there was investment in it and keenness in it, and that has continued really.
Excellent, thank you, Michelle. And Rachel, I'm hoping if you still can't hear what Michelle said, this might be a whole load of repetition, but it'd be good to hear your thoughts as well.
Apologies, I still can't hear Michelle, which is a shame. I'm eager to listen back so that I can hear what Michelle's been saying. But so I would say for me, my journey, I've participated in leadership and management programs, which have been really helpful to help me learn about myself and where my strengths and weaknesses lie, with communication and influencing and all of those skills. But I would also have project management training, and so I think these roles are really for people with a passion for training and development, and if you have a good knowledge of pathology training and education routes, and so you can advise people on aspects around accreditation, and you can navigate your way around apprenticeships, and you can help individuals on those aspects, and I think you would be very excellent in one of these roles.
Excellent, and I suspect we would all roundly support more people to be aiming their sights on such roles or very similar roles. And just to re-emphasise, I think we're all pushing hard to make sure these roles remain a key part of our landscape, aren't we? Talking about who and the gaps, a lot of people listening may not know who their practice educator is. Mehwish, is there an easy way of people finding out who their practice educator is, or what they can do to find out who that person is?
Yes, so we have a list of all the practice educators and their respective networks that they cover on our Future NHS Workspace page. We can hopefully post a link later on in the chat for people to access that page directly. Excellent,
thank you very much for that. So in terms of next steps, where do you think the practice educators can take us? As we covered, we have seen a lot of progress in the short time that you've been around. where do you think the practice education model could take us in the future? And Mehwish, can you answer that at all?
Yes. So at the minute, there's lots of exciting projects that are going on. We're always learning from other practice educators to see what new they've tried in their region that maybe will be beneficial with Arnix and try and replicate that. But there are a lot of ideas that we have which are more like long-term projects. And at the minute, because these roles are temporary, it's difficult to make a start on those or to see the end of those. So yes, I think the future is really bright if these roles do continue. There's a lot of exciting projects that the practice educators will be working on in collaboration with all the links that we've mentioned earlier, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more benefits going on in the future as well.
Excellent, thank you. So Rachel, where do you think the practice educators could take us in the next year?
I do feel we're at the start of our journeys. Certainly, the networks, the pathology networks, and their maturity seems to be at various different phases. So I do see we're almost at the start of the mountain that we need to, with regards to pathology workforce and recruitment, retention, EDI strategy, and all of those things. I think there's so much work to be done. I almost feel that it will be good to form, to continue the network collaboration and form some real valuable working groups to take some of this work forward. I think it's knowing where to start really and focusing it down on some, on a scope that where we can deliver some real, some valuable work streams.
Excellent, thank you. And Michelle, I know you've just joined us. Hopefully you heard some of what we're asking. And this is really about where do you think the future of practice educators will be? And perhaps for you, particularly around the work you're doing in the maturity matrix. So some people may not know what the maturity matrix is. It's a measure of the maturity of pathology network, but particularly aiming at the workforce. Have you got any comments about that part?
Yeah, David, sorry, I didn't hear the question, but I think, talking about the kind of future and see the role in terms of the maturity matrix, as you've just mentioned, there's work that needs to be done around that in terms of how the workforce can support the development of the networks to what we would class as a thriving network, and that we all work collaboratively, whatever that shape that takes. If we don't have a workforce, somebody who can work strategically across the workforce part of that, that bit is going to be a bit of a struggle. It's like, as you've indicated, it's quite a key part of that maturity matrix. There's 7 domains and it's one of them. So in terms of the future, for my role at least, I see the need to continue working on the workforce strategy that will align to the maturity matrix. But I also think there's lots of work to be done in terms of ensuring equitable access and transparency of access to funding streams and professional development opportunities, and raising the profile of pathology, as Rachel mentioned earlier on as well. There's lots of change, takes time, and it's not something that can be done overnight. And some of the workforce challenges that we see in pathology that lots of people on this call will be aware of has taken a long time. It's taken a long time to get to those points. There's, as much as there are things we can do quickly and things that can really support us, things will take some time, and we can't do it in 6 months or a year. And we're seeing lots of benefits, but we can also see lots more benefits if we just have that little bit extra time. Things like pipeline, we can't develop. I think Deborah's mentioned in the chat about apprenticeships. We can't introduce apprenticeships, develop them, and see the impact they have on our workforce and how it transforms our workforce in a short space of time. So we need our roles to continue to support things like that.
Excellent, thank you, Michelle. And actually, that's a neat segue, because actually it might be worth actually just touching on some of what you're doing some the other programs, so not just the apprenticeships, but T levels, etc. This is quite a broad brush, isn't it, in terms of more people into the profession, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to a little bit to T levels as well. I think it is a broad stroke, and I think we've recognised in my network at least that there's not a one size fits all for pipeline for pathology, and we don't really want there to be. We want to have options, and recognising that different people want to learn in different ways and somebody might want to do an apprenticeship, somebody might want to do a straightforward degree, there's lots of different options. And we are looking at T-levels within our network because there's something that the government are endorsing and the colleges are picking on, and we see it could be a potential pipeline for us. So we are kind of dipping our toes into that and seeing how that could support us in raising the profile of pathology and looking at another pipeline, but it certainly won't be the only pipeline. But yeah, there's a lot to think about, and it is about having lots of options, I think, as well. But it being clear, I think for a while, and it still continues, that it's not always very clear about how to become a biomedical scientist or a clinical scientist, or how to progress into becoming an advanced practitioner. And I think Rachel spoke to this. And there's something that we're trying to promote. If it's not already there, it will be there, about career pathways and making that clear to people. I think people still, from my experience working in universities, people still don't really understand what it means to have an accredited degree or why that's important. And there's lots of work to be done around that as well. And I think just being able to help with that clarity as well at all levels, starting at schools and all the way up with IBMS do a lot of work with this, and kind of us supporting that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and thank you, Michelle. I think that's an interesting challenge, isn't it? Because I think that is a problem that we see, of the number of people who come into the profession who perhaps don't quite have the right degree, and that can cause delays because a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And I think this is one of the ways of helping us to really help support people to the right qualifications at the right time, and ensure that they've got the right degrees or other qualifications to become biomedical scientists. We've got one person who wants to speak. That's Sherry Scott. I think hopefully you'll be made able to speak, Sherry, and ask your question.
I was just going to say, with the special issue in the British Journal of Biomedical Science on clinical education and training of biomedical science, has anyone thought about evaluating the role of the practice educators or their impacts that they've had, or just do a review of the role to sort of try and get that out there in that issue?
I don't know who wants to pick this up, because we do have an answer to this one, don't we?
We do. David, I'm happy to come in and answer that one.
Yeah, please.
So this has been done, Sherry. So there has been a review that's been done by our colleague Anne-Marie Pritchard, I believe her name is, and this has been shared. And so I think it's currently in the stage where it will be revised into a format where it could be published. I might be wrong, David. I'm sure you'll be more well versed on that than we will, but so that there has been an evaluation into the roles, and I guess as time progresses, we can certainly measure the value of the programs that we're implementing and measure the value of what we're doing, and so we can evaluate the benefits and share the benefits more and more. And
you're right, Rachel, that there is a report, isn't it? And I don't know where it is in terms of being made available publicly, but it does. It certainly demonstrates the value, and certainly supports the continuation of the practice educator roles. And we are using the unpublished document to push the roles into the devolved nations. So in the last 8 minutes of this Twitter space, it'd be useful, really, one, if there are any questions from those listening, please hand up. Not if you're a bot, but for the last few minutes, practice educators, perhaps really. It'd be useful to get some of your concluding comments or thoughts about what you've done, what you've learned, what you hope to do in the coming months. And I'm going to start in the order that you're on my screen, which is Michelle first.
Hi. A couple of things, maybe again not answering the question, but I just wanted to add to what we were speaking of earlier. Just to quickly say that there's been some questions in the chat. And I think you were speaking of it before about the devolved nations and about about how they might get involved. And I suppose one of the questions in the chat was about whether they can access the future NHS platform. And the answer is yes. And the reason I know this is because I've been to engage with some of our Northern Ireland colleagues and to discuss the role of the practice educator so they could find out a little bit more. And they wanted to get involved with accessing that platform. And so I know that they can. So yes, you can. I'm not quite sure how you do it. You don't need a NHS England email address to do, but I think you just request it. But also to say that, and I think I can speak on behalf of the other practice educators, that we would be more than happy to go and share our experiences with anybody in the devolved nations. If they want us to go and talk at any of their events and do anything online, if they want to ask any questions or anything, we'd be more than happy to do that. And we have done it for some people already. I can see people are putting Rachel and Mehwish are putting their thumbs up, so that's good. So in terms of when your question about where we see the role, David, I think supporting each other and supporting new people is probably a key part of the role as well. I think Rachel said about having a keen interest in training and supporting others. That's definitely, I think, at the heart of everything that we do. And I think the other thing to say on a slightly different subject as well, when we're talking about our links with IBMS, how we have our monthly meetings with yourselves and how we've got that kind of more of a direct I suppose link with the IBMS now, just to say it to people listening, we are your links with the IBMS as well. So if there's anything that you need raising or you'd like to find out about, we can do that for you. So you can find out who your local practice educator is, and even if you don't have one at the moment or you're not sure who it is, if you know, you can find out who it is in the future platform space. But you can always message one of us on Twitter or something like that as well. But I suppose that again ties in with the future of the role and where we see what's happening coming up. Again, it's that support, linking in, facilitating, making sure people are aware of how they can access things, and just making sure everybody's linked up. I don't know if we've mentioned it, I might have missed it, but trying to reduce the amount of duplication and siloed working, and I think helping to facilitate that is a key part of our role.
Excellent, thank you, Michelle. Rachel, same question to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to add, the future of these roles. So another project work stream that's come to mind is the work that still needs to be done on advanced biomedical science roles and advanced biomedical science careers. So, the example in cellular pathology reporting and dissection roles. So, there's huge pieces of work to be done there and aspects in the workforce, to meet the gaps in the future, particularly around digitalization and there's lots of new skills that we're going to all require in the future to deliver the patient care and the quality care that we need to deliver. So there's new programs coming along that we need to look at, and we need to sort of carve a way through to deliver these roles and deliver these new ways of working. So I foresee the practice educator role as being a dedicated role with the capacity and the space and the connections to take some of those work streams forward.
Thank you, Rachel. That's very, very good comments as well. And in the last few minutes, Mehwish.
Thank you, David. I completely agree with Michelle and Rachel, and I have the same thoughts. For me, it's really continuing the work that we're doing, trying to make our existing links even stronger, widening our network, and also in terms of the specialist portfolio program space, what are the next steps that we can do to support the laboratory training and really help get as many people through their specialist portfolio training as we can in the country. So yeah, really exciting and really looking forward to the future.
Excellent, thank you all. So really, from my perspective, and really to conclude, the workforce challenges that we have within the NHS, within the UK, one of the key solutions is going to be the practice educator role. And I think, I'm hoping that you've heard today that actually we've got a really proactive, capable group of people who are undertaking those roles in the three people who we fielded. I know there's a couple others who have joined the chat as well. I think I saw Sarah Oakley here and some others as well, I'm sure, who are all working on behalf of the profession and on behalf of healthcare to really understand our needs and requirements of our workforce. I can see there's a comment from Deborah, our president, who is stating clearly that the IBMS will continue to support and advocate for the practice educators, and I think we can all wholeheartedly get behind that statement and really embrace it. And when we're talking about the workforce, we are talking about everything from those people who are coming up through support worker grades, who are new into the profession, all the way through to those people who are working in advanced clinical practice as consultant equivalent scientists, reporting scientists at the very pinnacle of their careers, and everything in between. And I know honestly that Michelle, Rachel, Mehwish, and others work hard across those areas to ensure we're doing the best. And I think that means that our profession has got a huge role to play in the future. When we talk to stakeholders, when we talk to policymakers and government, we talk about the value that our workforce can bring, and it's individuals such as the practice educators who can really help facilitate that coming forward and really develop those within the profession as we go forward. So really all I've got to say is thank you very much for joining us tonight on this IBMS chat. I hope it's been useful. It's really great to hear from the work that practice educators have done. Please do look out the links that have been shared during the chat. Also, please share and continue the conversation online. As Michelle said, please do reach out to your practice educator, and if you don't know who they are, then please reach out to one of us and we can certainly put in contact with the right person. We will continue to advocate and to see and hopefully see these roles expand right across the UK for our mutual benefit. So again, thank you very much for your time today. It's 9 o'clock, the hour's gone very quickly. Apologies for the IT interruptions that we've had and also the Twitter bots, but we got there in the end, and I think we've had a very, very rich conversation. So thank you, Michelle, Rachel, Mehwish, and thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you all. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks so much for listening, and hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, why not tune in live to the next IBMS chat at 8 PM on the first Wednesday of every month on the IBMS Twitter feed, where you can join in live and ask the speakers questions. Just keep an eye on the IBMS social media feeds for details of the next session. Thanks again.